After days of slow drips leaking from the highly anticipated Senate expense audit, today the first chance to see the full report. The Auditor General pulled no punches. The oversight, accountability, and transparency around senators, he said, were quite simply not adequate.
Senators did not always consider the requirement to ensure that expenses funded with taxpayers' dollars were justifiable, reasonable, and appropriate.
In all, the Auditor General examined more than 80,000 expense claims from 116 former and current senators. 30 were flagged for questionable spending claims. Of them, 9 have been referred to the RCMP for further investigation. And if you're wondering just how much you paid for those questionable expenses, nearly $1 million. 5 senators alone account for more than half of that total. The CBC's Catherine Cullen has more on all this. Catherine.
Peter, the shadow of Mike Duffy loomed large over the Senate today with some of the very same questions at the heart of his criminal trial rearing their head in this audit.
Take the biggest alleged misspender, Rod Zimmer, with a whopping $176,000 in disputed claims, including housing. He represented Manitoba, but the auditor said he spent most of his time in Ottawa. Zimmer told the auditor he's had serious health problems and pointed to evidence given by a witness at the Duffy trial, the former Senate law clerk. Mr. Audson has testified that there is no percentage of the year requirement for a senator to be in his home province for the purposes of residency. The question of primary residence came up a lot in those 9 cases referred to the RCMP. Take Rose-Marie Lausier-Cool. The Auditor General says while she claimed her primary residence as Moncton, one year she was there for 8 days. She says she pays taxes there and has New Brunswick ID. Then there's the question of just what senators can charge for as part of Senate business.
Public funds should not be used for personal or private activities.
Yet former Senator Don Oliver expensed a fishing trip and a golf game with other ex-senators. He's since paid the money back and says he acted in good faith. Former Senate Speaker Noel Kinsella charged taxpayers more than $5,000 for he and his wife to travel to a funeral, his own brother-in-law's. The auditor says Kinsella called it Senate business because the man had been a leader in the Italian-Canadian community. Kinsella's response, Senate administration said it was okay.
They design their own rules and choose whether to enforce those rules.
The auditor is calling for transformational change in the Senate, including an independent group to monitor spending.
It's really about installing confidence in back to the Canadian public that the Senate can manage these expenses.
The Senate leaders are suggesting the Senate will take the auditor's advice.
We will take quick and decisive action.
We will carefully examine the recommendations in the Auditor General's report.
And there are 2 sitting senators whose files were sent to the RCMP. The Senate Ethics Commissioner will now decide if they should be suspended. Senators are hoping for a fresh start.
Now we have a roadmap to go further ahead.
The audit cost about $23.5 million to identify less than $1 million in questionable expenses. But the auditor says it is money well spent because it will prevent future misspending and help the Senate change its behavior. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.